Hello, welcome back to Christian Tradition. This week we are looking at the Hiitorical Jesus. We live in an era of information overload. If you spend enough time on certain corners of the internet, you will encounter a very modern idea that Jesus of Nazareth never actually existed. He was a myth, a literary invention, a Christ myth cooked up by early Christians who simply borrowed bits and pieces from pagan sun gods like Mithras or Horus. It's a compelling story for a YouTube thumbnail, but there is one major problem with it. No serious historian on the planet, whether they are Christian, Jewish, atheist or agnostic, actually believes it. To suggest that Jesus of Nazareth did not walk the earth in the first century is, in academic terms, as fringe as suggesting the moon landing were staged in the desert. We don't just have the Bible to tell us he was here. In fact, if we threw every New Testament manuscript into the fire, we would still have enough testimony from his enemies and from secular historians to reconstruct the basic outline of his life. Today we are opening the cold case of history. We are looking for the original signal. Imagine you are a Roman historian in the year 116 AD. Your name is Cornelius Tacitus. You are a man of high status, a senator, and you absolutely despise Christians. You call their faith a deadly superstition and a pestilence. You have no reason to help them. You have no reason to validate their story. But in your work, The Annals, when describing the Great Fire of Rome under Emperor Nero, you record something vital. You mention that Nero pinned the blame on a sect of people called Christians, and you write that Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty under the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of their procurators, Pontius Pilate. Tacitus isn't trying to convert you. He is recording a historical fact. A man named Christus was executed in Judea by a Roman governor. He doesn't treat Jesus as just a legend. He treats him as a historical criminal whose followers are causing trouble in Rome. Then we have Pliny the Younger, a governor in what is now Turkey, writing to the Emperor Trajan around 112 AD. He asks for advice on how to put Christians on trial. He describes them meeting before dawn to sing a hymn to Christ as if to God. He doesn't say they sing to a myth. He describes a movement centred on a person they treat with divine honours. We even have Suetonius, the secretary to the Emperor Hadrian, who mentions the Jews being expelled from Rome because of disturbances involving Christus. These Roman side notes are historical gold. They show us that within a few decades of the crucifixion, the existence of Jesus was a matter of public record, even to people who wanted to wipe his followers out. But the Romans were not the only ones watching. We have the testimony of Flavius Josephus, the most famous Jewish historian of the first century. Writing for a Roman audience in 93 AD, Josephus mentions Jesus twice. In one famous passage, often called the Testimonium Flavianum, he describes Jesus as a wise man who performed surprising feats and was condemned to the cross by Pilate. Now, scholars debate how much of that passage was touched up by later Christian scribes, but most agree on the core facts. Josephus recorded that Jesus existed, that he was a teacher, and that he was executed. But it's his second reference that's even harder to ignore. He records the execution of a man named James, who he identifies as the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. For Josephus, Jesus was a real person whose family members he could identify by name. Even further east, we find a letter from a Stoic philosopher named Mara bar Serapion, writing to his son from a prison cell. He asks what advantage did the Jews gain from executing the wise king. It was just after that their kingdom was abolished. He ranks Jesus alongside Socrates and Pythagoras as a wise teacher whose influence outlived his execution. Even a later Jewish Talmud, which is certainly not a pro-Christian source, records that Yeshu was hanged, a common term for a crucifixion, on the eve of Passover. Now here is a question that changes everything. If you were going to invent a sun god or a hero to start a new religion in the ancient world, would you make him a victim of a Roman cross? Today we wear crosses as jewellery. We put them on top of beautiful cathedrals. But in the 1st century, the cross was a symbol of pure, unadulterated horror. It was a supplicum servile, the slave's punishment. It was designed to be the most shameful, lingering and degrading way to die. To the Jews it was even worse. Deuteronomy 21:23 said, "Cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree." The crucified man wasn't just a failure. He was someone cursed by God himself. This is what St. Paul was talking about when he wrote to the Corinthians. He said, "But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles." That's what 1 Corinthians 1:23. Look at the words he used in the original Greek. For stumbling block, he used the word skandalon. This is where we get our word scandal. To the Jews, the idea of a crucified Messiah was an oxymoron. It was a scandal, a theological trap they could not get past. For folly or foolishness, the Greek word is mōrian. This is where we get our word moron. To sophisticated Greeks and powerful Romans, the idea of worshipping a crucified criminal was literally moronic. It was a height of absurdity. We even see this in the Alexamenos graffito, the earliest known visual depiction of the crucifixion. It's not a beautiful icon, it's ancient graffiti scratched onto a wall in Rome, showing a man worshipping a figure with the head of a donkey on a cross. The caption reads, "Alexamenos worships his god." It was a joke, a mockery. You don't invent a crucified hero, you account for one. The early Christians didn't preach the cross because it was good marketing. They preached it because it was an inescapable, scandalous and moronic fact that they could not deny. But if Jesus existed, and he did, and if he was crucified, and he was, then we have to deal with what he actually said. He didn't just tell people to be kind or to love their neighbours. Many teachers have said that. Now, Jesus made claims that would be considered insane if they weren't true. He claimed to forgive sins, a power Jews believed belonged to God alone. He claimed to exist before Abraham was born. He claimed that he and the Father were one. As C.S. Lewis famously argued, this leaves us with only 3 logical choices. He is either a liar, a lunatic, or he is Lord. If he knew he wasn't God, but said that he was to gain power, he is a liar, and a particularly cruel one. And if he believed he was God but was mistaken, then he is a lunatic, on the level of a man who thinks he is a poached egg. But if his claims are true, then he is Lord. The one thing you are not allowed to call him is just a great moral teacher. No just a moral teacher would say the things he said or claim the authority he claimed. History gives us a man. It gives us the cross. It gives us the scandal and the folly. But if he were just an executed criminal, his movement should have died on that hill outside Jerusalem. Every other Messiah movement of that century vanished the moment the leader was killed. But this one didn't. Within 3 centuries, the scandal of the cross had conquered the Roman Empire that had tried to crush it. Something happened after the crucifixion that turned these terrified hiding disciples into people willing to die for their moronic claim. Next week we are going to look at the one thing that changed the world. We are going to look at the resurrection. Was it a hallucination, a conspiracy, or a physical fact that changed the course of human history? Please like, please share, please subscribe, comment below and hit the notification bell. I'll see you next week, and may God bless you and guide you.